use for their performance. And then, and why would they use something really old? So this is why, from my point of view, a lot of magicians and illusionists have gone out of business through time, is the use of shock and awe tactics. Why? Because, well, shock and awe, these tactics, when I've encountered them, it's based on the person not knowing how something works, or ideally not having seen anything before. Now, someone who's in science, engineering, technology, and mathematics, the base foundation is good enough to be able to guess. And so, well, if they're phrasing it as nobody's ever seen this before, or they're taking that approach, it's gonna be wrong, because some of us either have built it, have come up with the science that's underlying it, or can get a good enough guess that it's not actually shocking. So once the audience has seen everything, they go back to developing new cutting edge technology, or finding it. And I'd say that's the immature version. That can cause the collapse. So repeat this and collapse might occur. I would phrase this as, I wrote this down, collapse does not equal a lack of longevity. So collapse can take a long time. It doesn't mean it's gonna, like, all of a sudden one time they didn't get it. No, these people develop a following, right? So it could take, even if the system they're using is broken and they've come up with nothing new for 20 years, they could still be top of the turnout or sold out performances and stuff. It doesn't mean it's new, or that kind of thing. It doesn't mean it lives up to the, just because an audience or a concert or a performance is sold out, doesn't mean it lives up to the magicians or the illusionists' expectations. And eventually that can eat away at the person performing and cause collapse. And then the other option is stabilization. And I would call that definitely the minority, but the people, like, I would say this is people who realize they're there to entertain and make that, mature enough to make that mental realization of they're there for entertainment. And yeah, it's just kind of that simple. They don't go, they might stumble upon cutting edge technology in science, but it's not actively sought out. The actively seeking this out and not finding anything, or continually just being behind, can drain a person. So I'd say the stabilization comes with a, you know, we're here to entertain and it's about the audience and stuff like that, versus the shock and awe tactics tend to be trying to divorce the performers from the audience. And usually it comes with, like, control complexes in the magician or the illusionist kind of thing. This might be what I call them. They're trying to assert a form of control over the audience, versus the stable magicians and illusionists who mature are there to enjoy performing and have the audience enjoy it as well, and not at the expense of the audience. So, like, they respect the audience, kind of. They don't play the audience as a fool. That's kind of the problem with saying nobody's seen this before. It's like, okay. Consequences. Well, first off, I'll say I'm not really one for shock and awe tactics. So, like, I like stabilized magicians and illusionists because it's actually kind of fun. Like, it's fun. It's enjoyable. They're there. But I would say the alternative I prefer to shock and awe is transformation. Why? Because I am a physicist, and there's things called shock waves in physics, and when shocks occur, certain transformations can occur in the material that's being shocked, And so a new transformation or a new structure develops that was not there before. However, that can occur without shock waves as well. So, and the majority being more than 50%, the majority of transformations do not occur in shock waves. And so for me, I love transformation a whole lot more than shock waves. And so I am making like a physics to social analogy here. If you don't know anything about shock waves and you're not a physicist and you just hate like jargon and stuff like that, I recommend reading this book. It's my favorite book, Shockwave by Clive Cussler. I like it in part because it does get the geology and physics rather right. Oh yeah, and that's also why I like transformations, is there's a lot, the vast majority of transformations in nature are not due to shockwaves. So there's a physics to geology kind of thing. And so I recommend this if you want to understand a little bit about shockwaves, and it's an action and adventure book. And so it does a really good job of some basic education in a non-jargony context that's actually rather enjoyable. And then if you like that book, so it's by Clive Cussler, it's called Shockwave. If you like this book, I recommend reading, and you want a book that's timely, I recommend reading Sahara by Clive Cussler. It's about the spreading of a virus in Africa. And it gets into the kind of some of it, but not too over the top, about like the nitty gritty of how viruses spread. Specifically, that one's like waterborne, but it's still kind of relevant with the COVID-19 pandemic and stuff. Just so a reminder, not all viruses are spread the same, so that's like a waterborne one. Relevant for me because I live in Washington State and we have it's also related to nuclear waste, and we have the largest nuclear waste site in the world. Yeah, so relevant for me in a different way as well. I don't know about you. And then, what are the consequences of, I would say, so consequences of magic and illusion? Exclusion. And what do I mean by that? I'm talking about specifically playing the audience as the fool. Why? That's the performance is at their expense and they already paid for the performance, so hitting them on an emotional, psychological, kind of human level in addition to a financial level is just kind of, well, it's inhumane. So in water polo, that would be called a major foul. You've done something very wrong, or the magician has done something, or illusionist has done something very wrong. And so in water polo, this is water polo analogy, it's called an exclusion, where a person is kicked out of play. Not permanently, it's temporary. However, they are not allowed to play. Usually, small fouls don't result in a person being like, it's like, kicked out. And depending on how severe this is, the entire team can suffer. So then not only is this person kicked out, they're not allowed to have a substitute come in. Lesser fouls, so if it's not as severe, then somebody might be able to substitute in for this person when they're not allowed to play. The really bad ones are this person's out and nobody else is allowed in. And I would say that's kind of an analogy for musicians where hurt people enough and people don't show up, kind of thing. And that's just reality. Speaking from experience, enough actors are really poor, or so there's the playing the audience as the fool, or it's just not entertaining. And I started this off kind of with the film industry. I haven't been to a movie in theaters since 2018, plus or minus year, and I used to be the person who would go to theaters like 5 to over a dozen times a year just because I loved movies. And so the Hollywood effect or illusion has worn off on me, and so I just don't go. So it can be a exclusion of the magician or the illusionist, but it can also be complete loss of an audience if it's done at the expense of somebody else or loses its ability to entertain. And I still think that's a bit rooted to people not focusing on it as entertainment, kind of losing sight of that and why people enjoy it in the first place. So that's some of my thoughts on magic and illusion.